Welcome back to another episode of Stacking Dennys. I'm Jordan McAbee of RotoBaller, my co-host Nick Giffen of the Action Network. Finally, we get a non-Chevy winner in victory lane. Joey Logano gets the win from the pole in dominating fashion at Atlanta. I know we have some opinions about this race. There's a lot of opinions going around about this race. Jeff Gluck's poll said 52.3% said yes, that this was a good race. Last year's Atlanta spring race got 68.5%. Surprisingly, though, out of the 6 races this year, including the Clash, Atlanta is number 3 on the list for good races, which kind of blows my mind because that was not a good race. And I'm going to be repeating that a lot during this episode. That was not a good race. If you enjoy this new Atlanta, I have absolutely nothing for you. That was awful. But Christopher Bell comes home third. Maybe could have been second. There's some controversy going around there about a video screenshot of did Christopher Bell actually beat Keselowski to the line and was NASCAR scoring off? Bob Pockris said teams have, I think, 20 minutes or 30 minutes after the race to ask NASCAR to review something. Clearly, Joe Gibbs Racing did not. But from what I've seen from those pictures, and obviously, this can be different viewpoints and different angles and stuff. It looked like Christopher Bell beat Keselowski to the line for second place. But anyway, official results, Keselowski second. Another good run for RFK Racing, by the way. Christopher Bell in third. Corey LaJoie, once again, finishing top 5 at Atlanta. He seems to really like this track. Tyler Reddick finally gets a good finish on the year, finishes 5th, as does Eric Jones, coming home 8th. Ty Gibbs with a top 10 finish, coming home in 9th. And then Kyle Busch rounding out the top 10, along with Hamlin and Blaney in there also. But, overall, the race, we saw what initially looked to be like Ross Chastain getting a little too aggressive again with Kevin Harvick leading. But after replay, we saw Harvick just got loose and Chastain happened to be there like he typically is in a lot of these incidents. But, I know, Nick, there was a tweet about this that, someone said Chastain doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. So I definitely want to touch on that. But first off, what were your thoughts on the Atlanta race? Does Ross Chastain deserve the benefit of the doubt? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Ross Chastain goes, he's never going to get the benefit of the doubt, even though I don't necessarily think there needs to be a benefit of the doubt when it's night and day. It's not an iffy thing. It's not like, well, did he spin him out or did he potentially? He didn't touch him. And even if he did touch him, it was already after Harvick had gotten loose and spun anyway. So there's no benefit of the doubt thing here at all. That's just how drafting racing works. You are on the guy and, you get close to him to help bump draft him. And sometimes you get close to him just because you're drafting, and that's how it works. He didn't touch him. He didn't knock him to spin him out. It happens. Sometimes cars get loose because of how the airflow happens and lack of traction. And we saw Bubba Wallace spin on his own. It happens. So there's no benefit of the doubt or not. He didn't do anything. So I don't care about benefit of the doubt or not. He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Overall, as far as good race, I was going to say, as far as good race, it sucked. We'll talk about that more, as you said.
Yeah.
It sucked. And I know people say, well, stage 3 made up for it. I got thoughts on that too.
Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, well, let's talk about the standings here quick before we get into whining about it. Joey Logano, now the points leader after 5 races. Again, he got the win. First non-Chevy win. Logano gets back in victory lane. Now the points leader. Christopher Bell only 1 point behind him there in second. Ross Chastain third. Blaney. Brad Keselowski 5th in points. That is not something I had on my bingo card to start out this year, but I'll tell you what, between how hot Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing is to start this year and how good they were on the road courses last year, I don't know. I could see a victory for this team coming soon. Keselowski is when they made this switch, when he partnered in, I said it's not going to do anything. It's not going to make any profound effect, but I think we're seeing this year. I don't want to throw Keselowski into the championship picture like he used to be. I don't want to pre-call this too early or jump the gun here, but I'm just saying 5 races in, I am very impressed with how Brad Keselowski looks. And I just think that's very noteworthy on the points and after 5 races. This doesn't seem like a fluke to me. But
let's real quick. Obviously, Hendrick had those points penalties, but even with those 100 points back, Brad Keselowski would still be 6th because William Byron, if he had 100 to his 55, that's just 155, and Keselowski's at 160. And Larson's even further behind than Byron. Only Alex Bowman would jump ahead of Brad Keselowski. Bowman would be the points leader right now without that 100-point penalty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. Speaking of penalties, I want to talk about this real quick. Josh Williams in the Xfinity race on Saturday. He had a piece of bear bond come off the car, which is, you're done for the race when that happens. He wasn't too happy about it, so he just parked his car on the start-finish line, got out, and walked to the infield, which he was then promptly called into the NASCAR hauler, received a 1-race suspension. What was your thoughts on that? Because I thought it was hilarious. It's something Kyle Busch would do. It definitely got a lot of eyeballs, not only on him, but on the Xfinity race and on his sponsors. Something like that, I cannot say that it's awful for the sport because I think it brings more eyeballs to it. And we talk about it, how these drivers are cardboard cutouts. I like people with personalities, and Josh Williams apparently has a very good personality because that was awesome.
Yeah, I didn't see it, March Madness and stuff, so I missed it when it happened. But just looking back at everything, I wasn't. Well, I didn't follow it all live. I haven't rewatched the race back. I don't even fully know the situation, but I'm all for a guy having a personality in NASCAR. So thought it was pretty interesting. I thought it was. The most interesting part to me was when Denny Hamlin was like, "Yeah, I'll pay your fine" or whatever. I mean, I think that point you realize you got some of the other drivers on your side. So to me, that was the most noteworthy thing.
Yeah. I just saw this. I didn't see this. It looks like news broke yesterday. NASCAR is going back to the old restart zone lengths.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it didn't quite give us what we were looking for, so we're going back to the original. Like, what are you looking for? I don't see how these were supposed to change anything. We talked about this at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. And we both said, I don't really know if it's going to do anything. And the only thing it did is it created that stack up at one of the races right off the start of the season. I think it was, I don't remember if it was Auto Club or Vegas, but one of those first couple races where Logano was supposed to restart, or maybe it was even Daytona. I just don't remember. But it was an early restart, one of the first couple races of the year. Logano kind of, I don't know exactly how it happened, but I remember he was the leader, and it just stacked the whole field up, and a bunch of cars wrecked right on the restart. So
yeah,
didn't turn out the way they wanted it. They said they were going to do a 5-race experiment. The 5 races are passed, and obviously didn't work out. So back to where we were last year.
Yeah. But yeah, moving on. We're going to get straight into wine about it here because I got some things to say. I don't have a lot to say. I know you have a lot to say, but the Atlanta race sucked. I don't know. Okay, once again, this is Wine About It, presented by Luvabella Winery. Shout out to them for being a great sponsor of this podcast. But the Atlanta race was awful. The racing was awful. The entire weekend was awful. I don't understand why they didn't have any practice. The drivers did what a lot of people kind of called out last year. They just go out there and ride around. Like, if you're in the lead, you're basically just riding around. You're logging laps. You're not actually seeing any racing. This new super speedway pack, like, obviously super speedway races can be exciting. We've seen super speedway races at Daytona, Talladega, super exciting, lots of passing. Atlanta Motor Speedway is not as wide as Daytona or Talladega. There's not enough room for these guys to make any moves. So unless they get super aggressive, which is what we saw in the final stage of this race, they're out there just logging laps and kind of just figuring out what the hell's going on. And for them to take a track like Atlanta, which produced some awesome racing, it put the effort into the drivers' hands. It made the better drivers stand out. I understand people didn't like it because, people got out to 20-second leads and just absolutely dominated the race. But the fact of the matter is, I'd rather watch something like that than the shit show that we saw on Sunday, because that race was unbearable to watch. And I cannot understate how many times or how often I do not say that. I rarely say that a race is unwatchable, but that was awful. That was an awful race, and NASCAR should be embarrassed for what the hell they did to that racetrack.
I totally agree. And my wine about it, presented by Luvabella Wines, and I do actually have their Cabernet Sauvignon here. So I'm going to have a little bit of it. I've already had it because I was having really bad neck pain the other day, and I knew this would help me relax my muscles a bit. So it was the one thing I had on hand. And so I've already reviewed it in my personal head. So I'm going to just have a sip here. But I'm a cab guy, and I love cabs, and this is right up my alley. So just another stellar review for me for Lugabella wines. A little more acidic because it is a cab, but that's what I like. So if you like Cabernet, this is a very in the middle Cabernet. It's not too bold, it's not too acidic, but it's got some of each, so it's like perfect. So anyway, there's my wine review for that, but I'm going to kind of whine about the race, but also whine about myself because, remember last week on this episode or on Stacking Dennys, I was like, I don't want the race to be shorter. I'm not glad it's 400 miles. Give me 1,000 miles of racing. like that thing I was saying.
Yeah.
Because I think Greg Mathern had tweeted something about it. And, I'm not going to say I wanted less racing because I still always want more racing, but that was pretty brutal. That was quite painful to watch. I mean, there was a point, and I shouldn't say a point, there was a large chunk of time where it was a 36-car train around the track, just one after the other, follow the leader. That's not exciting. That's not racing. That's riding. We want racing. And like I said, I'll kind of game the system here a little bit. I said I want 1,000 miles of racing. That wasn't racing. That was racing, no. Terrible. And then people are like, well, what about stage 3? And there's a reason. So if you saw during the race, I tweeted out over under on Gluck's poll, 19.5% for good race. Everybody kept saying under, and I was like, you guys are chiming in too early. I think it's going to be over because they're going to be competitive in stage 3 and things are going to happen and people are going to be like, oh, it was a great race. And that's what happened. But it wasn't a great race. 2/3 of it was terrible. And then the last third was like, they could get side by side, but they just couldn't really advance. Like, you remember the Penske's were just sitting there underneath Brad Keselowski, and they were just all stuck there until the final lap, basically. There was nothing that happened even in stage 3, it seemed like. So, I didn't enjoy the race. I definitely voted no, and I think since you and I have started Stacking Dennys, I think I voted no 3, maybe 4 times. This is one of them. I know Martinsville last year. I think Bristol Dirt last year, and that might be it, honestly. Might be 3. There may be one more I'm forgetting about, maybe from the year prior, but this would be at most number 4 that I voted no on since you and I started Stacking Dennys. Just a bad product. A terrible product. And, I don't know how, I mean, not to fix it or anything, but, it's, they're not going to go back to, well, we'll put normal rules on it because that's going to be unbearably bad. I just think there's a little bit of I'll give people a pass here in a little bit of a way. There's almost a no-win situation because Atlanta had to be repaved. It was so old, falling apart, weepers. It had to be repaved. And the problem with a repave is then the track becomes terrible because it's so much grip you can't pass. And there's not multiple lines and all that. So I understand what they're trying to do, but the product's just bad right now at Atlanta.
And I feel like it's almost gotten worse compared to last year, the first year of this new track. I feel like it's almost gotten worse. And that's... You definitely don't want to see this sport take a step back, but definitely was not where it needed to be. Another part of it, and I thought this was going to be your whine about it, was going to be Mike Joy.
Yeah, it was going to be, and then last night when you and I were going to record, which of course we ended up having to push, which is Mike Joy had tweeted out his mea culpa, his I'm sorry, so I was like, We'll forget about that. But I'm glad. I think at some point, I'm not going to speak for Mike Joy. I'm not going to speak for Fox or anything like that. I feel like he was probably pushed into that based off of the response.
Oh, yeah.
But into apologizing or whatever. So it sounds like it's done. But why are you calling keyboard warriors out over a new feature you're introducing? That keyboard warriors have nothing to do with that. So it made no sense. It was.
I think it's Fox trying to be edgy. and
yeah,
hip,
it just wasn't. It wasn't any. And they're trying to be edgy and hip, but I think they're doing it all the wrong ways. I don't know if you saw Denny Hamlin's thing. Like, while we're at it, why don't we get rid of these damn cartoon things? Like they look
so bad.
Yeah, they look horrible.
But yeah, like we got a good question about this, and it's something I wanted to talk about anyway. Was Mike Joy, I feel like, needs to step away. Like, he called it the Nextel Cup during practice. Buddy, we haven't had Nextel Cup since early 2000s. What's going on? He called Corey LaJoie's sponsor, which is Celsius energy drink, he called it Cialis. Come on. Like, I feel like Mike Joy's losing it. And
there were a lot of times last year he couldn't get names and numbers right. And I'm not even talking about guys switching cars or teams. There was just some bad ones. And, at this point I've almost tuned it out because I just kind of expect that from him. But I know there's been a few others I've tweeted this year. Like, what? Like, that made no sense.
Yeah. And that's one of the questions we got was, if you could put, who would you want in the booth? Who's your dream booth?
So for me, I'd love Lee Diffie for IndyCar. Mm-hmm. I think he would do a great job for NASCAR as well. So he's NBC instead of either Mike Joy or Rick Allen. And then add in, I really like Letarte. I think he brings a good perspective. I love Dale Jr., obviously. And I really like Kurt. I really like Kurt Busch, and we're going to get to hear him this weekend on Fox. I thought he did an amazing job in those truck races for Fox last year for FS1 or 2, whatever channel they'd end up being on. I think Kurt Busch he's very insightful. He's passionate, but he's not stupid. Like he doesn't make like ridiculously dumb jokes or things that just aren't funny. So that's kind of, I think, what I would prefer to see if I could like pick my dream team, broadcasting team.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Dale Jr. I actually really like Mike Bagley from MRN. I just hate the fact that Rick Allen constantly calls him the bag man. Like, he makes it a point to say the bag man 50 times in a broadcast. Excuse me. But I think Bagley does a good job. And then Dale Jr., to me, needs to be in the booth at all times. He offers a ton of information. And I really like Jeff Gordon. Like, I think he does a really good job.
I love Jeff Gordon in the booth. I love Jeff Gordon in the booth. But there's also some bias there just because he was my favorite driver.
Right. But, like, compare, like, I don't think Boyer does a terrible job, but he needs training on how to announce these races. I actually personally enjoy Tony Stewart in the booth. I think he's a little funny. He's super dry sense of humor.
Yeah, super dry. I kind of enjoy it. I don't know. I mean, obviously his analysis is great because he's Tony Stewart. He's one of the best of all time. I enjoy him more than I enjoy Boyer. And it's not that I don't enjoy Boyer. I don't think he's quite TV polished, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'm done complaining and thinking about Atlanta. I'm already on to COTA in my mind. So once again, this was presented by Luvabella Winery. You can order their wines online. Do not hesitate to do that. I think if you order a case, you save like 10% and free shipping. I think. Don't quote me on that. I could be completely wrong. Anyway, I will drop the link to order those online. You can also find them in stores, several states, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, big stores such as Kroger, Meijer, Walmart, all the good things. Make sure you check them out. Very good wine, as you've already heard. But I want to talk about, I saw a video of Kyle Busch doing an interview, and I just pulled like his point out, which I haven't really heard this talked about before, and I just want to discuss it a bit. He basically said that it is so difficult now to, and I'm paraphrasing here, he could have not meant this, but this is how I interpreted this. He basically said it is so difficult, and the competition is so high right now that it is so difficult to win a championship that it doesn't cheapen the guys that, the Richard Pettys, the Dale Earnhardts that raced in different eras, but it was a lot easier to win a championship back then. And it got me thinking, is a championship necessary to get into the Hall of Fame, do you think?
I don't think it's necessary to get in the Hall of Fame.
I know we've talked about it with Denny Hamlin. You think Denny Hamlin's a Hall of Famer and he's never going to win a championship. So, but you know, it did. It got me thinking, like, you know, we put this championship on a pedestal, of being, you know, the pinnacle of this sport, and that's how you really cement your legacy. But there's plenty of drivers that don't have a championship that are, in my opinion, some of the best in the sport. And, you know, again, it is the competition is so high right now, and it is so even, especially with this new car. I completely understand where Kyle Busch is coming from when he says that. And I know people will probably take it out of context and be like, oh, he's just, you know, whining because he doesn't have 7 championships. But the fact of the matter is, like, if you can, like, what Jimmy Johnson did, in my opinion, makes him the greatest NASCAR driver of all time. Because yes, it was not as equal as it is now, but the competition, I think, was still very high during that time. So for Johnson to go through and get the championships that he did, especially the ones back to back to back to back, Jimmy Johnson, in my opinion, is the number 1 driver of all time, and you can't convince me otherwise.
It's Jeff Gordon for me. It's Jeff Gordon, and it's not close for me.
Really?
And it's not. Look at wins, and look at how dominant his wins were. And then 2 of the years Jimmy Johnson won championships, or at least one of them, and I think another one of the years early in the playoff system, Jeff Gordon was by far and away the best driver that year, just not in a 10-race stretch or even a couple race stretch. You know, it was like the Kevin Harvick of 2020, I think it was, when, you know, Harvick had 9 wins, was just, he and Hamlin were just 2 clearly dominant cars, and neither of them won the title. It was like that. And it's so much harder to win a title now that when you do, it's great, but I don't necessarily think it's representative. And I'm not going to devalue the championship. I'm not going to say this guy doesn't deserve those championships. He does. But I don't think it weighs as much in the greatest of all time conversation anymore, because you can go way above your championship expectation now, or way below your championship expectation now, versus, you know, in the 90s, let's say, before the playoff system. And then, but at the same time, the 90s was like the perfect era because things became more competitive compared to the Petty era. And so winning 7 championships in the 90s, which nobody did, Dale Earnhardt, 80s and 90s, or 90s or early 2000s before the the playoff era, would have been a much more massive accomplishment than what Petty did, in my view. But winning 7 in the playoff era isn't necessarily as much of an accomplishment, because it's so much easier to go over your playoff championship win expectation because of higher variance. So we're in a higher variance spot where, you know, certain drivers can come in several championships above expectation, and most will come several championships below expectation. You know, it's just kind of the nature of where we are with a higher variance playoff system, and that's totally fine. That's the system we're in now. I love the playoffs. I think they're great. I think they're fantastic. That's not me criticizing the playoff system. That's just me saying, when we're comparing drivers between eras, it's not close for me that Jeff Gordon is the greatest of all time. Look at his wins. Look at his pure dominance, and look at what he would have done without the playoff systems that, you know, he ran under.
Mm-hmm. I'm just doing some quick math here on overall stats, because I'm curious how these two compare, you know, when it comes to top win rate, top 5 rate, lap led rate. Yeah, to see how I'm almost done here.
Hey, you're good.
Yeah, so
Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, so
there we go.
Johnson's at, you know, lap led rate is 9.7%, whereas Gordon was at 10.8%. Johnson actually had a higher win rate for total number of starts than Gordon did. Gordon had a significantly higher top 5 rate. He was at 40%. So Johnson was at 12.1% for his win rate, whereas Gordon was 11.6%. Gordon was at 40.3% for his top 5 rate. Johnson was at 33.8%. And then top 10 rate, again, Gordon higher, 59.2% compared to Johnson's 54.4%. So, I don't know. To me, they are extremely similar. I understand the point you're making. I think this was a further part of that Kyle Busch interview, was like his Mount Rushmore of NASCAR drivers, and I'm pretty sure I might be getting my videos confused, but I'm pretty sure he had Petty, Earnhardt, Johnson, and then I think he put Gordon number 4. You agree with that Mount Rushmore?
That's the 4 I would have. Yeah, I don't know about the order, obviously, but Mount Rushmore, we don't have an order on those 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. They're the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. Those are the 4 guys I would have, and it's not a question. There's no debate in my mind for me. I think Kyle Busch is fantastic. I think he could be in the conversation for that by the end of his career. But at the same time, he hasn't been as dominant in the Cup Series as either of these two were. And for me, the Cup Series is what weighs absolutely the most. I don't care if you've won 200 Xfinity races or whatever it is, 100 Xfinity races and 50 truck races. That doesn't matter to me. For me, the peak of the sport is the Cup Series. So I want to know what you did there. And that's what's keeping Kyle Busch off for me. And still, arguably, maybe 5th on that. But Mount Rushmore only has 4, so I'd have to leave him off.
Yeah. Do you think we see the level of domination like we saw with Johnson, like we saw with Gordon? Do you think we ever see that again? Obviously, it's hard to predict the full future.
We can see it in stints. I think we can see it in stints, like we saw with Kyle Larson his first year with Hendrick. Mm-hmm. Hamlin and Harvick, the COVID year. I think there's opportunities to have bursts of that in a year, but I don't think we're going to see what we saw with Jeff Gordon, where he, for 4 years, just killed everyone. Like he finished first, second, first, and first in the championship from 95 to 98. And it was the most insane streak of all time, just those 4 years. So I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that again. Even Jimmy Johnson had several years where he arguably was the dominant driver every single year. I don't know if we're going to see that ever again. We didn't even see it with Kyle Larson. Like last year, he wasn't the dominant driver. Harvick wasn't the dominant number 1 driver a couple years in a row. Certainly there was the big 3, around 2016, 17, where it was like Truex, Kyle Busch, and Harvick felt like they won everything. But I think, we're in that era of, I wouldn't say complete parity. Obviously, as I think we both believe, as this car ages over time, the big teams will separate them out, and that'll remove some of the parity, and there will certainly be some guys that stand out. But I have a hard time believing, especially with the way NASCAR wants to keep things entertaining and competitive to keep bringing in eyeballs, that I have a hard time seeing where we're going to get somebody that's just as dominant as they were in the past.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it can go for like a year or two, but a sustained stretch of 5 years or so, I think those days are over. Like we saw Truex from 2016 to 2019. He won 4 races, 8 races, 4 races, 7 races. I feel like that's very good years there. Finished second or first in the playoffs 3 of those 4 years. And I just don't see I don't see, especially in the near future, I don't see this happening. Outside of maybe like a Kyle Larson, like you said. Like he might be able to do it.
Jeff Gordon won 40 races in those 4 years. I was just counting them up. 40. Yeah. That's average of 10 a year. If somebody hits 10 in 1 year these days, that's absolutely insane. And guess what? Those weren't 36 race seasons. Those were 33, 32, 31, and 31 race seasons.
Yeah, absolute domination those years by him. Especially, what was it? The 1998 season for Gordon. 13 wins, 26 top 5s in 33 races. That is absolutely ridiculous how good that...
4 wins in a row, 6 out of 7, and 8 out of 10 at one stretch there. From Sonoma through Darlington, he won 7 out of 9 races. And, the other 2 races were a 3rd and a 5th in that stretch. And then right before that, he had a 2nd and a 3rd. And right after that, he had a 2nd, a 2nd, a 2nd, a 5th, and a 2nd, and then a 1st. It's like, it was the most, arguably maybe the most dominant year in NASCAR history.
And here's the thing.
Jeff Gordon had the highest, I think Jeff Gordon had the highest peak of any driver, period, in NASCAR history.
Here's the thing, though. Like, we're sitting here saying that it's not going to happen again, or it's unlikely to happen again. I don't think NASCAR can afford it to happen again. Because there's nothing there's nothing that gets people less excited about NASCAR than the same guy constantly winning. Like, yeah, it was awesome to see Larson get his 10 wins in 2021 and win the championship, but you couldn't tell me from like a casual fan standpoint or even a hardcore fan standpoint that was exciting because, you know, he was just so good. And I mean, obviously, if you're a Larson fan, it's going to be different. But yeah, I feel like NASCAR needs the competitiveness, needs the equalness to try to continue bringing eyeballs into the track, even though, you know, once again, the viewership was down for this last weekend's race.
Yep, exactly. And I agree. I don't necessarily think NASCAR can afford to have a year like that, but I will say at least the playoffs brings it back together after, you know, 26 races. So at least there's some competitiveness, uncertainty as to who will be the champion still, because, you know, Harvick won 9 races and didn't even make the final 4. So
yeah.
At least there's that component of it that NASCAR has going for them if there was a guy to just be as dominant as Jeff Gordon was in 1998.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of dominance, we're on to COTA this weekend. And the dominant road course racer in the series is not racing. He's still out. And there's a lot of different names in the entry list here for Circuit of the Americas this weekend, the Echopark Texas Grand Prix. Jordan Taylor's in the number 9 for Hendrick Motorsports. Jensen Button in the 15 for Rick Ware Racing. Connor Daly's in the 50. Jimmy Johnson's in this race in the 84 for Legacy Motor Club. And Kimi Räikkönen, again, coming into that 91 for Trackhouse Racing. Now, we've had 2 Cup Series races at Circuit of the Americas. Ross Chastain has a win. Chase Elliott has a win. They're the only 2 drivers with top 5s in both races. Remember that first race? That was the rain race, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the absolute shit show that Cole Custer almost got killed, along with, I think, Martin Truex Jr. Just ridiculousness. But last year, we got a quote-unquote normal race at COTA. Like I said, Ross Chastain got the win. Alex Bowman, our boy Alex Bowman, finished second. Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick. Now, this is going to be, you know, Tyler Reddick obviously moved to Toyota this year. He's with 2311. Toyota 2311, Joe Gibbs Racing, struggled on the road courses last year. This is going to be something to keep an eye on because Tyler Reddick was a very, very good road course racer last year. He got 2 wins on them. I know you have a theory about Chevy this weekend, so I'd love to hear it. What is your theory about Chevy? I know when opening odds came out, you were not impressed by any of the lines outside of, I think you hit Chris Buescher at 50-1, 40-1, something like that. But other than that, you know, Larson is the favorite this weekend. Chastain's up there. I think you can get Larson at like plus 650 as of right now. Do you like that? And what's your overall thoughts there on Chevy with what you're thinking on their potential, I'm assuming, advantage?
Yeah. First of all, just talking real quick, you mentioned all those drivers that are coming in. Connor Daly in the 50 as well from IndyCar Series. Not as in a competitive a car. I think the other 4 at least have a chance to be in competitive cars. But I don't think that money team is going to be very competitive. But it's cool. We have 2 IndyCar drivers. We have Connor Daly and Jimmy Johnson. We have a couple F1 drivers in Jensen Button and Kimi Räikkönen. And then, of course, we got a sports car guy in Jordan Taylor. So it's cool that we've got all the major series coming into NASCAR. So my theory on Chevy, and a lot of this is we've got this new aero package, right? We've got this low downforce 2-inch spoiler. We're moving the strakes again. So we're going to have the low downforce, low drag setup. And we saw what that did at Phoenix. That did a lot more tire wear than we'd seen in the past. You know what? Like, you know who really struggled in tire wear last year? The JGR cars. They had decent short run speed, but they were absolute garbage on the long run. Overall, the road course races. And the road courses where they did the best, think about Indianapolis road course where Christopher Bell had a really good one. That was with no tire wear almost. Like Blaney, remember, I think he took like 2 tires in one stop and still nearly won the race because he got out ahead of Tyler Reddick, but Reddick was just so strong that he ended up winning. I know Christopher Bell won the Charlotte Roval, and that does have tire wear, but that's because he put on fresh tires at the end when other people didn't. He was not a top 5 car. He wasn't close to a top 5 car. Look at it, average green flag speed. He was 7th, I believe, and or even way lower than that. I think his average running position was 7th. Average green flag speed, I think he was outside of the top 10. And that's with an extra fresh tire stint on there. So, I don't think Toyota's going to do well because they struggled so much with tire wear last year, and now we're increasing the tire wear. And COTA's on the medium side of tire wear for these road courses, the 6 road courses we're racing at. So I'm not too convinced that Toyota's going to be good. Then think about Ford. What was the big change with Ford this offseason? It was the nose. You know what that nose change did? It reduced their drag, but it reduced their downforce. And you know what we see with the Toyota or the Fords this year? We see them struggling on the long run because they have more tire wear. We saw it at Phoenix. We saw it at Las Vegas. We saw it at Auto Club. They're struggling on the long run. They don't have long run speed. And now if we take extra downforce and extra drag off even more, I think they're going to struggle even more. I think this is a Chevy race. And like you said, you get Kyle Larson at plus 650. You can actually get him plus 700 at Westgate Superbook. I know there's Superbook is in a few other states. And you get him plus 707 at Circa. So I actually think I'm going to bet that because I have value on that in my model. So I like Kyle Larson with Chase Elliott out and with what I think are downgrades to Toyota and Ford. I like it, and I don't really want to wait for practice and qualifying because we know how good Larson is in qualifying at these road courses. So
yes,
this is something I think I'm going to jump on. And I know I bet Buescher 40-1, but that was way too long for me. Like that was way too long. It's not like these guys can't win, but I'm not betting them at 12-1 or 15-1 or 18-1 like we're seeing out there, unless it's a Chevy. Then maybe I'll bet an 18-1. I was contemplating Daniel Suarez 18-1, that kind of thing. But if we're talking 40, yeah, that's totally fine. I don't have an issue with that. If you want to grab Harvick at 30, 35, like I'm not betting Harvick myself at that number, but I understand it. But I'm not sitting here betting a Toyota or a Ford at these 10, 12, 16, 18 numbers. I think this is a Chevy race this year. And we'll just have to see. My theory could be completely wrong, but I think both Ford and Toyota are going to struggle, I should say, on this long run. And I think the Chevys are going to be the team to beat.
And that makes a lot of sense, all the points you made there. Plus, Chevy's just had all the speed. And I think Chevy overall just has better road course racers. What do you think about Ross Chastain? Defending winner of this race. And also him and Suarez. Like Suarez, they both showed up on the road courses this year. Do you think Larson is significantly a better play than those guys? Or is it close like some people are thinking?
I think, no, that's a really good question. That's why I think I like Suarez at 18, or whatever you can get him at in that ballpark. I actually think Circa has 22-1. So, I like Suarez. I like Ross. I like Kyle Busch. I like Kyle Larson. But for me, without Chase Elliott and with Tyler Reddick now at a Toyota, it's clearly Kyle Larson number 1 for me in the pecking order, like clearly. So that's why I like Larson. Certainly Ross and Suarez are good. You remember last year, like all of Hendrick struggled at COTA, but then they figured it out as the year went. They were the best team at Sonoma. They were the best team at Road America. If you look at like the whole team, obviously Tyler Reddick won that race, but they were the best at. I think. There was some in contention, but I think they're arguably the best at the other 2 road courses as well. Indy road course, Tyler Reddick again. So that's why I think I do like Kyle Busch. But I just think Kyle Larson has the edge up on Kyle Busch for me by a decent bit. So, it'll be interesting to see. I think the 2 Trackhouse guys, I think Kyle Busch, I should say 2 of the 3 with Kimi Räikkönen. I think Kyle Busch, I think Kyle Larson are all very strong bets, and certainly we can't count out Alex Bowman. He ran so strong here last year.
Who I was just about to ask.
Yep. And obviously we've got the Blake Harris situation with the suspension for the crew chiefs, but he's still going to have input on that car.
Remember how good Michael McDowell was
last year. Yeah. Remember how good McDowell was at road courses last year.
Yeah.
And then how good the 48 car was last year at COTA. So you put those two together, it's not like Blake Harris doesn't have any influence on anything because he's suspended. He is 100% saying this is the setup we're going into, and if the driver gives this feedback or that feedback, these are the changes we're going to make. That's already pre-planned ahead of time. Their strategy is also probably pre-planned, barring weirdly timed cautions. So, there's not going to be a ton of we've got a new crew chief and Blake Harris won't be there, that kind of stuff. So I love Alex Bowman this week.
I'm right there with you. I think this is a good week for Alex Bowman. And just, Hendrick overall, I don't think you can go bad against him, even though they don't have Chase Elliott on there. What do you think about the guy that's replacing Chase Elliott, though? You think what kind of performance you think we're going to get out of Jordan Taylor?
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I don't think he's going to be a race-winning car. Obviously, he's a talented, super talented sports car driver. He's won some championships in IMSA and just incredibly talented family, Ricky Taylor, his older brother by 2 years. And he's driven these cars. He's driven the Garage 56 version of these cars in testing because that's going to be like the next gen car, but tweaked to run in the 24 hours of Le Mans. So he's driven what's essentially these cars already in testing. He's not going to be a driver for that, but he's the coach. And by being the coach, he's also driven some laps himself. So he'll be competitive. I just don't, I don't think he's necessarily been in the situation of how these drivers race and how I'm not even worried about the pit stops or anything like that. I think it's more just the overall strategy, the chemistry, he hasn't been in this situation for this kind of a race, but I think he's going to be good.
Mm-hmm. This is his first, he's never raced a truck race, never raced an Xfinity race. He's going right into a Cup Series car, and I understand the hype behind him. I understand people saying, he's in a great car and he has this whole history. It's still the fact this is his first Cup Series race. So try to temper your expectations there with him. I'm really excited to see what Jimmy Johnson does, though. Getting into a non-super speedway race back into NASCAR. I want to see what he does. I want to see what kind of performance he puts on this. I don't think he's going to win. But
I'm extra curious because you know what he did in IndyCar? He mostly raced road courses.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder how much that experience of being around guys that not only, but by and large race road courses, and a lot of them, until they got to IndyCar, only raced road courses. Getting that kind of feedback, that kind of cars that go way faster, I think it's good for him. I think he's probably learned a lot. I don't know how it'll be able to reapply it back to these Cup cars, but I'm very curious. I'm right with you. I think it's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. And you look at his career wins as far as road courses go. He has one at Sonoma, and that's it. That is his only career road course win. So Jimmy Johnson was never a great road course racer, but definitely going to be it's going to be interesting to see if he can improve. And we saw Eric Jones have decent speed in that what was Petty GMS last year on the road courses. There's no reason to think that Johnson won't have a good car underneath him. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what Johnson does. But one of the big topics this week is there are now no stage cautions at this track, at road courses, and this is the first time we're heading back. So you remember, I used to be really, really, really good fantasy NASCAR wise at road courses, and then the stage cautions came in, and that's when I started going downhill. Because the race has changed so much and strategy changes so much, and that's not to say there isn't strategy that's going to come into play here Sunday, but this might be what I'm most excited for, is to see how this race plays out with no stage break cautions, because you know what? All of a sudden, all these teams are looking at strategy, especially with how this fuel mileage goes. They get 28 to 30 laps on a fuel run. This is a 68 lap race. You cannot make it in one stop. You have to do two stops. And when do you, like you said, when does tire wear come into play? What do you do this weekend? I don't think any crew chief really knows. It's all going to depend on if there's cautions. If there's mid-race cautions, will NASCAR finally get to the point where they're going to have where only a part of the track is under caution and not a full track caution. I doubt it. They're still going to throw that stupid shit. But that's just another change this week that people have to consider. And I don't know what to expect. I don't know what these crew chiefs are going to do, but I'm excited to see it unfold because that's one of the best things about road course racing, old school road course racing, was these strategies that these pit crews, gambled with and then either failed miserably because of an ill-timed caution or it really worked out for them and they got the win. So I think that's going to be awesome.
There's an extra wrinkle even though, because like when we look back at those old, caution-free, not caution-free, like they didn't have cautions at all, but like the stage manufactured cautions, pre-stages, they didn't have stages. Now we have stages, so that is still a point of consideration for certain teams and drivers. Do they grab the playoff point and sacrifice something? Because while it's not as big a sacrifice, if you're staying out hoping to grab that playoff point and a caution comes at lap 29, you're screwed, right? Then you have to pit under yellow. You go all the way back to the tail of the field. So it doesn't help you to stay out as long. So if we look at the fuel window, 26 to 28 laps, Ross Chastain ended his fuel run at 28 laps last year. That's kind of like the peak of the window there. So 28 laps is 2 laps before stage 2 ends. So if they get enough caution, we could see some teams try to gamble and make it to lap 30 before they pit. But, I don't think it's going to be the fast teams. Because if you're fast, you have a good chance to win the race. You want to pit earlier in the window so you don't get caught out like that. So in case the caution does fly, you cycle back to the front. But with the extra tire wear, I don't necessarily know if you want to pit right at the start of the windows, right? So the way we do road courses, and I know Larry Mack's going to talk about it, we count backward. So let's say a fuel window is safely 26 laps. So 68 minus 26, that puts us at lap 42. And then you take 42 minus 26, that puts us at lap 16. And you know what's nice about lap 16? That is the first lap after stage 1 ends. So you can run the whole stage 1. The good cars will win stage 1, and the good cars will probably win the race, potentially. And then it can pit right after stage 1 ends. It's still going to be green, right? It's not going to suddenly go to yellow because we're not doing that anymore. But you can pit at lap 16 if you want. I think a few of them maybe try to extend it a couple laps because of tire wear. Maybe we'll see pit stops closer to lap 20. But that means you're pitting before lap 30. And I do think if we get a caution at a certain point in time, maybe 1 or 2 early cautions, you're going to see other guys, non-faster guys, extend their fuel window to try to get to lap 30 to get those playoff points. Like if you think about somebody like, maybe not an AJ Allmendinger, but who's not a road course ace that could use these? Let's say maybe somebody like
Austin Dillon.
Austin Dillon. Yeah, he could absolutely use these extra, points here. And the reason it doesn't hurt you as much, extending your window and then pitting is because everybody's pitting under green anyway, barring, the untimely caution coming out. So that was the problem with staying out long, and pitting under caution. But now, because you'll be pitting under green and everybody else is pitting under green, you're still approximately going to cycle back to where you were in the train. So it doesn't hurt you as much to stay out longer to lap 30, etc. So it not only will it get him extra stage points, but it'll still get him the finish he probably would get instead of penalizing him by starting all the way in the rear of the field. So it actually is a very beneficial strategy for a guy like an Austin Dillon, a guy like a Bubba Wallace, to grab those extra stage points. I think it's a very, very good strategy, and we could see that play out on Sunday.
Do you think any of the Hendrick guys are going to employ a similar strategy to get stage points with the penalty that they've been assessed?
Possibly.
I don't think Larson will. Byron
just to get the playoff point. Byron to get the playoff point. I don't necessarily think Bowman.
There's no way I could see Larson doing it because in my mind he's going to have the car to beat and they're going to go for that race win. They're not going to jeopardize that. This isn't Alan Gustafson out there. So
if you're not safely in the playoffs like Byron already is, and you have the potential to have a race-winning car like both Larson and Bowman do, I think you play the we pit when our window opens, a few laps after our window opens game. So, in that 16 to 20 lap range there. And then, if you're Jordan Taylor, yeah, maybe they run Jordan Taylor long. Why the hell not? Get on split strategies there. If a caution comes out, let's say the pit window opens and half the field's pitted by lap 20, and then the caution comes out, you still have several laps to drive away from the field to get to lap 30 and then pit. So you won't cycle all the way to the rear, even if the caution comes out kind of untimely for those people. They'll still get their stage point and then cycle back, and that would help. The reason I say that for Jordan Taylor is because that would help Hendrick with the owner's points for the 9 car there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just lost my train of thought there a little bit.
I geek out to this strategy stuff. I'm so I love road course racing in general.
Right.
That's partly why I love IndyCar so much. There's a lot of strategy involved. I love following all the different strategies. And I don't have faith in this, but if Fox does it right, they could make this a really great broadcast by tracking all these strategies. I don't have faith in it, but it's not necessarily impossible. I think having Kurt Busch in the booth is going to help, but we'll see.
They probably won't even know that their strategy is going on. That's how much I have no faith that they're going to know anything. But, when it comes to long shots at these road course races, a guy that doesn't get talked a lot, or I guess he does, but always flies under the radar is like a Justin Haley. Always what?
I bet him top 10. That was my write-up this morning. And
I know.
Yeah, I love it.
So
glad,
and the reason
you're saying that.
The reason I brought that up was because I was on Facebook earlier and a post from Colleague Racing came up in my feed. And can you believe that Justin Haley has passed the most cars in the Cup Series this year? Most green flag passes.
I can believe it, but I wouldn't have guessed it.
Right. Yeah. Let me pull up this list really quick because Allmendinger's up there in the top 5 as well.
Plus, they're in the Chevys, man. They're in the Chevys. I love the Chevys this week.
So, listen to this now. Green flag passes this year. Justin Haley, number 1 with 998. Truex, Gibbs, and Reddick, all Toyotas, in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Presumably because, Reddick started in the rear a couple times. Gibbs hasn't had good qualifying efforts. A.J. Allmendinger 5th, Kyle Busch, Bowman, Stenhouse, Hamlin, McDowell, the top 10. But just noteworthy there that, Justin Haley has been pretty solid this year. And again, I don't want to call him underrated, but he kind of is. Not enough people talk about this guy.
Especially road courses. Let's compare Justin Haley to Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs has had 3 road course races in the Cup Series, and Justin Haley has had 13. Justin Haley has more top 10s in those 13 than Ty Gibbs. Now, Ty Gibbs only had 3, but in the 3 head-to-head races, which was last year, road courses, Justin Haley beat Ty Gibbs in 2 of them. The other one, he was 1 or 2 positions behind. I think that was Indianapolis road course, which all mayhem broke loose in that race. And he finished 5th at the Roval. Justin Haley did. So I love this, and plus he's in the Chevy, which I think is the advantage this week. I love the 7-1 top 10 value I got. That went away as soon as I tracked it in the app and tweeted out the article.
That lasted plus 430.
That lasted 2 minutes. I went to plus 430. But I just think Justin Haley at 7-1 is so underrated. I mean, he won in the Truck Series. He finished 3rd at Indy Road Course in 2021. Guess who finished 4th in that race? Chase Elliott. He finished ahead of Chase Elliott. And Chase Elliott wasn't in a shitbox car or even a mid-tier car. He was in a junior motorsports car. So, it's just he's such an underrated road course racer. I'm excited to see how he does. And look at last year at COTA. He had better stats than most of the Toyotas did. In terms of average green flag speed, average running position, those kinds of things. Justin Haley had a really strong COTA race. It didn't work out in the end. I think he finished 15th. Yeah, 15th. But he had a very strong car. He was ahead of Chase Elliott at the end of stage 1. And remember, he and Elliott employed the strategy where you don't pit and like Daniel Suarez's strategy, and then they pitted at the end of stage 1. So he was ahead of Chase Elliott after stage 1, then got shuffled to the back of the field and still ended up finishing 15th. So I think he's a very, very good road course racer and doesn't get enough credit for how good he is.
Mm-hmm. Another aspect this week that we have to pay attention to, we have practice on Friday with qualifying on Saturday. I know, you tweeted about this. Practice really doesn't mean a lot at road courses. It can actually be deceiving because there's no actual long runs. And I feel like that's a point that we need to hit on here is, 5-lap average doesn't tell you a good picture of what these guys are going to do. Yeah, it's cool to see who has a fast lap, but how do you balance between overreacting or underreacting to someone's speed during practice compared to, what we can expect to them in the race? Especially with this being the first road course race of the season. We have no idea who's going to have the best road course package this year. Last year, we did not expect Toyotas to be so bad on road courses, and it was like that for most of the year until they finally, they kind of figured something out there toward the end. But whereas, Roush, Fenway, Keselowski was the opposite. They found something between the first 2 road course races, and all of a sudden they were contenders each time. So legitimate contenders. Like Buescher and Keselowski were top 5 contenders in road course races last year, which, going into the season, you would have never expected that. Buescher was always like a fringe top 10, could surprise, but not expecting it all. So how do we balance that, the speed and the expectation as opposed to who we know is fast on these road courses?
Yeah, I think the thing to do is just to not overweight in your brain. I think we can take notes that, hey, this guy had a fast lap, but a fast lap doesn't mean a good race car. Let's look at Circuit of the Americas, this race, last year. We didn't get any 5-lap times because we only had those, 20-minute sessions or something, and each lap is 2 minutes and 12 to 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So we didn't get long runs. So last year, all we had were single-lap times. Number 1 in single-lap speed was Kyle Busch. That didn't go so well.
No.
Let's look at Sonoma, where we got 5 and even some 10-lap runs because it's not quite as big of a track. Well, number 3 in 5-lap average, Kyle Busch. That didn't go so well.
No.
So if you had told me last year based off practice, just based off practice, absolutely no other information, who would be the car to beat at road courses based off of Sonoma and Circuit of the Americas, I would have said Kyle Busch arguably would have been the car to beat because Elliott and Larson were number 1 and 2 in 5-lap average at Sonoma, but they were garbage at COTA. So I would have said Kyle Busch would have been the car to beat at road courses, and Kyle Busch was nowhere near the car to beat at road courses last year. So practice is going to be misleading. It doesn't mean it's not useful, but if you don't use it in the right way, which is more like mental note, this guy has the potential to be fast on a lap or 2, then it's going to bite you in the ass. Look who was 4th in practice last year at COTA. Harrison Burton. That didn't go so well. Right. So don't put too much stock in 1 lap or 5 laps even, especially if tire wear is coming into play. And even with 5 laps, we can't really tell fall off, so we have no idea. It's so tough. You'd have to actually have the individual lap times, and I know there are people who do a good job of scraping that data from wherever, but it's going to be very tough to handicap things based off of practice. So we'll have to handicap things more based off of what we hear, what the drivers are saying, what the crew chiefs are saying, what what we see on TV. Does this guy look like he's struggling over his 2nd or 3rd practice lap, that kind of thing. The other thing is there's rain in the forecast. So if we have rain during practice, that's not going to go well either. Now, it is likely to be out of the way by the time practice starts, but there's no guarantee of that. So if we have maybe a damp start to practice, that's going to tell us even less.
Yeah.
So it's very, very tough. I don't want to over-rely on practice, but I also don't want to bet too much on this race because there are a lot of unknowns, which is why I have just the 1 outright bet so far and just the 1 top 10 bet so far. It is a race where I think it's a really good race to, again, kind of like Atlanta last week, just pull back.
Go light on.
go light. Yeah. You don't need, and PJ made a great point about this. PJ Walsh of Action Network made a great point. Just because lines are out doesn't mean you have to bet. And I think that was kind of his way of saying he's not betting anything. I think it's fine to make a few bets, and I don't think he was saying that either. I think it could have come across that way to people. So that's why I quote tweeted. I was like, I think this bet was fine, but it's the only one I've made, that kind of thing. So I think there's opportunities to make bets in this race, but please don't go too hard on this, especially too early, because we don't know a lot. And even my Chevy theory is still speculation. I think it's good speculation. I mean, look what happened with the Fords last week in qualifying. Nailed it. But it's just one of those things where, just based off of the rules, the packages, everything we've seen, what we know about these cars, Fords aren't set up for the long run. And Toyota struggled on the long run at road courses specifically last year. So I just think this is going to be a Chevy race, but practice isn't going to necessarily tell us if it is. I think what practice probably can do is if somebody's out to lunch, they're probably not going to be the fastest car all of a sudden. It's like last year. Kyle Larson was 16th in speed in practice. Chase Elliott was 30th. They weren't the cars to beat. Now, Chase Elliott still ended up getting a good finish because they improved that throughout the race. But when you're that behind the 8-ball that early, it's going to be hard to win the race.
Yeah. Now, practice, we're on the same page there. It doesn't mean a lot. What about qualifying? Because, again, with no stage breaks, excuse me, no stage cautions this week, you have to assume that starting position is going to be a little bit more important. This, barring a caution, you're not going to, if you have an issue or if you start further back, you're not going to have the chance to make up much ground once this race gets going. Because, you start out front, you're clear sailing, you're stuck in the pack, you got to maneuver your way through there and hope that you get a caution to bunch everybody back up, and if you have a good car good enough to win. So do you think starting position is going to be much more predicative of race success than practice will?
I do. I think it will be, but at the same time, again, I don't want to put too much stock into a lap. We still don't know how some of these guys will be on the long run over even a 5-lap practice and a 1-lap qualifying session, right? So I highly doubt we're going to see 10-lap times in practice. It's possible. It's possible somebody does a 10-lap run, but you know how long that's going to take? That's going to take 30 minutes to do a 10-lap run of your 50-minute session. I think teams will want to more do like 20 minutes, cool the car off for 10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes, and then do another like late 10 or 15-minute run. So I don't think we're going to see a 10-lap average. If I had to put over/under on half of a 110-lap average, I'd set the line to minus 120 to the over, but that means, it's still, plus 110 to the under. I think there's a very good chance we don't see a 10-lap average at all in practice.
Are they doing the split practices again too, or are they doing
no? It's just practice? one big 50-minute session.
Yeah, if they were doing the split, there'd be no chance that we'd get these 10-lap averages. So we'll
definitely see some 5s, but again, that's not going to tell us about fall off. And if we get some 10s, it's only going to be 1 or 2, probably at most a handful of 4 or 5 drivers, I would think. So that's not going to tell us anything because we're not going to know how the other 30 whatever drivers are doing over a 10-lap run. We're not going to know their fall off. So I just don't see this being a situation where practice is going to be super useful. I also don't see it as a situation where qualifying is going to be super useful. And so it's really just, it's tough to say. And yeah, I just think it's a really good week to go light. I think it's a very, very good week to go light on betting.
I still think I'm going to hit Larson plus 650 just to have him because he's going to get down. If he has a good practice in qualifying, he'll get down to the plus 300 range easily. We've seen it happen before.
Agree. I think I would take Larson 707 at Circa, and I'd take Bowman and Suarez 22-1 at Circa. And I may actually do that after we record this. But that's just Larson because he's Larson and Chase Elliott's out. And then, I think Bowman and Suarez make a lot of sense as Chevys who have the potential to win this race.
Mm-hmm. One note for the tire compounds this week, they are bringing new tires compared to last year.
Another unknown.
Yes, and the main change is there's a compound change to give the cars more grip and introduce more tire wear. So, if that happens and your theory on the Fords and Toyotas is correct, that once again just plays into the hands of Chevy, which makes me want to bet Kyle Larson even more. So, just a little note there that Goodyear is trying to make a little bit more tire fall off happen with these road course races this season, or at least COTA right now. This is the tire for COTA. But yeah, as far as practice qualifying and that weighing into people's mindset of who's going to be good this weekend, to me, just as like we've seen all season, the first 5 races now, the people that were good at these tracks last year are good at them again this year, and I think that's going to be the same exact thing for road courses. I don't see there being a huge change. It's going to be surprising to me if all of a sudden Toyotas are out there blowing everybody out of the water in speed. I just don't see it happening. I see Toyota continuing to struggle, and I see Chevy absolutely dominating like they have this entire season and they did last year. Because Chase Elliott always dominating road course. Reddick was dominating road courses last year. Chastain was really good at road courses last year, as was Suarez. That Larson as well. I'm forgetting Larson, for Christ's sake. But I just see a lot of these road courses going the exact same way as we saw last year. And I guess my mindset going into this weekend and what I would recommend people would be, don't overthink this. Don't try to get too cute. There's weeks to get contrarian. I don't think this is the week to do it. Obviously, we haven't seen this race yet. Obviously, I have no reason or solid footing here to say that this is going to be it. But, last I saw, Chevy was minus 125 to be the manufacturer to win this race, and I think that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't bet it, but I think I think that line is fair. Because
I agree. I actually think I would bet it at minus 125.
Do you?
I think I might. I think I might. I legitimately think I might. I have convictions, right? And there's only so much a model can say, but that's part of the great part about this is, I have this model, and it's going to be different from my own personal convictions because I can't build in I think Ford is going to have more fall-off factor. Or I think Toyota may have even worse fall-off factor, right? Like, there's these things, these trends that we noticed. Like last year, Toyotas did better at the road courses where there was less fall-off. And they did worse at the road courses where there's more fall-off. Circuit of the Americas is kind of in the middle. It's like with Watkins Glen. And I know Greg said you can't really compare Watkins Glen to Circuit of the Americas. But remember, Watkins Glen last year started out in the rain. So that's why you can't compare it. Overall, I think over many years, there is enough similarity between Watkins Glen and Circuit of the Americas, especially in like average speed, tire fall-off, that I think will be pretty comparable. But if we look at tire wear only, Toyotas did better at the races with less tire wear. Indianapolis road course, and there was some at Charlotte Roval, but again, the fresh tires is what really helped Christopher Bell there because there was tire wear. So that maybe that creates an opportunity, but I think teams will learn from that. It was also a very desperate situation because Bell only could win to get to the next round of the playoffs, right? So there was a lot of desperation behind that call as well. And other teams playing it safer for similar reasons. They needed to point their way in. So I think that kind of was a different scenario than we could see at the end of this one, where I think teams will be gunning for the win at all costs, doing whatever they think they can do to get the win, instead of one or two of them going for the win and the rest of them trying to play it safe. So it's, to me, when we add in extra tire wear, I don't understand, where we think all of a sudden Toyota is going to be good. Denny Hamlin or Martin Truex Jr. or Christopher Bell or Bubba Wallace, any of them. I don't know where we think any of them are going to be good all of a sudden. I think obviously every team is going to change in the offseason, and they're going to learn and make improvements. I think it's possible to make improvements, but I also think the change the rules package makes it more uncertain, which could help them. But at the same time, I'm not sitting here seeing anywhere in the data that makes me feel convinced that Toyota is suddenly going to be back where they are, other than we don't know. So I'm not going to bet a driver on the shorter end of the stick at we don't know. I will take a flyer on a longer end, I honestly don't even hate if you take Denny Hamlin or Martin Truex Jr. You can get him 39-1 at Circa or 30-1 elsewhere. I honestly don't hate those because what if Toyota is better? Then I'd rather have them at 30-1 than, let's say, Christopher Bell at 15-1. But it's just one of those things where I just feel very strongly about my conviction. I'm going to go against whatever my model says, and I think this is a Chevy race this weekend. I very much do. And, that's the great thing about it. None of us are wrong until we're wrong. These are my opinions. And I'm pretty opinionated, pretty vocal with my opinions. And I'm not saying anybody's wrong for their opinions on their bets or anything like that. I'm just giving my point of view of where I see things. And that's why we have this podcast, is because we're both opinionated. We both like to say what we think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I like doing it, because it gives us this outlet of, more than just being a keyboard warrior there on Twitter. can actually vocalize my thoughts and everything. But as far as other maybe like long shots here at COTA. One surprising guy, I'm going to go back to Austin Dillon here. His 2 finishes, and obviously the first year can be chalked up as a fluke, but Austin Dillon has significantly improved at road courses. From a DFS perspective, that could be a guy that people are low on because of his overall bad history at road courses, but he was actually pretty decent at them last year, and it'll be interesting to see, especially with Kyle Busch now. I mean, I think he learned a lot from Tyler Reddick, and I think he's going to learn from Kyle Busch. I think that's going to bring Austin Dillon as much as I hate to say it, as a halfway decent road course racer here this weekend. So that's another guy I have my eye on, as well as Michael McDowell, especially with how that team's qualifying. Like if qualifying and starting position is going to make that big of a difference, that team somehow has qualifying figured out this year, and we all know what he can do at road courses. He's not a bad road course racer at all. So Michael McDowell, definitely another guy that's on my list there to pay attention to. Any other mid or lower tier guys that you got that you're particularly keeping an eye on? I mean, we haven't even talked about a guy like a.k.a. Allmendinger. We all know how good he can be on road courses.
Yep.
Any interest there in betting him? It looks like his odds. Yeah,
I totally forgot about him. Like when we were talking about the Chevys, he's another one. Like obviously can win. So yeah, I think it's, again, I really do have the Chevy conviction, and of the Chevys, Larson, Kyle Busch, a.k.a. Allmendinger, both the Trackhouse cars, Alex Bowman. This is going. Obviously, we can't count out William Byron. I mean, he had a really strong Indy road course race. Was in the contention for top 3 there until all hell broke loose. This is going to be, and these are just the Chevys that we're talking about. We got a lot of talent here. Jordan Taylor, I don't know how he's going to be. Kimi Räikkönen, I don't know how good he's going to be. We've got so much talent here. And then that doesn't count the Christopher Bells of the world, the Ty Gibbs, who's a great road course racer. And I know I'm putting down the Toyotas, but if they are somehow good or near as good as the Chevys, all of a sudden those guys are in play. Denny Hamlin has had a really good streak there of road courses. There was a time where he was the guy to beat on road courses. Martin Truex Jr., same. There was a time where he was the guy to beat along with Chase Elliott. So then we go to the Fords. Austin Cindric immediately comes to mind. Chase Briscoe immediately comes to mind. You mentioned McDowell. Kevin Harvick comes to mind. Joey Logano is certainly no slouch at these road courses, as is Ryan Blaney, very underrated road course racer. I'm sure I'm forgetting Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski. I mean, look at how those RFK cars have improved. This has the potential to be a spectacular race. Who knows how good Jenson Button's going to be? I mean, that car is going to have Stewart Haas Racing support. I don't know if that's going to matter or not. But this is setting up to be potentially very exciting. There's just so much uncertainty that I don't want to be taking too many shorter guys. And if I'm going to take a guy on the shorter end of the stick, I'm going to take a Chevy. So that's kind of where my convictions are.
Mm-hmm. And, you talked about Logano. Ryan from iFantasy Race tweeted out a couple days ago, the no stage breaks is probably a plus for Logano because he's had problems in the past of going for those points, tanking his afternoon. He said in 2022 at road courses in terms of stage finishes, Logano won 3 stages and only finished twice outside of the top 10 for stage points. So Logano is another guy, like he's not a bad road course racer at all. Do I think he's going to go out there and dominate this race? Absolutely not. But with the right strategy, he could be a contender for sure. And yeah, I completely agree. I think the no stage breaks is a definite plus for him and his team.
And Chase Briscoe, I would say, because he did a lot of the similar, and sometimes Austin Cindric as well. So those Fords could be kind of sneaky.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. I'm trying to figure out if we've missed anybody, specific we're talking about this week. Obviously, Bubba Wallace is not good at road course racing. I think I saw somewhere where his odds were the same as Kevin Harvick, which made me laugh. These books do not realize how bad Bubba Wallace is at this racetrack.
He did get better.
These type of
he certainly
racetracks.
got better, but I wouldn't put him on Kevin Harvick's level.
Yeah.
He did get that 100-1 top Toyota or whatever it was.
That was fun.
Which was just silly, yeah. But
yeah, you bet that every single 100 out of 100 times you bet that. When it's Bubba Wallace versus what it was last year, 5 other Toyotas in a race that historically always turns into a shit show, you bet that.
My favorite was Road America. Remember, we bet Bubba Wallace 101 top Toyota, and he actually started making progress through the field. He was ahead of Kurt Busch. He was ahead of Truex, I think, and Hamlin, and he basically had Bell and Truex. Maybe it was Bell and Truex he had left to get past. I think one of them had an issue. I know Kyle Busch had an issue. So he was there, and then he had his own problems. And somebody gives a shit for betting him 100-1, and it's it was a terrible bet. Y'all are dumb. And then he goes out one road course race later and finishes top Toyota, and it was at 100-1. It's okay, I guess we're dumb for hitting 100-1 after doing that off of just 2 opportunities. Real dumb. Well, I shouldn't say I hit it. I was the guy who mistakenly forgot to bet it. You hit it the next race.
Yeah,
but yes, I would have done it had I not forgot. Essentially,
I haven't seen any top manufacturer bets available this week, so I haven't seen. I just don't. I don't envision books giving us lines like that again. The 100-1.
Yeah. So Caesars has top manufacturer. Bubba's 18-1, which is not a bet at all. And then the Canby books have top manufacturer, and it was something in that same neighborhood. So just not bets for me at those prices. I'm mildly interested. Canby Caesars has 6-1 for Kevin Harvick top Ford. And the Canby books, Barstool, Bet Rivers, those kinds, they have Harvick 8-1 for top Ford, which I think is mildly intriguing. They have him behind guys like McDowell, Buscher, etc., Logano, whereas he's ahead of those on Caesars.
Interesting. What do we think about a guy like Ryan Preece? Because he actually has a cup start here at COTA. So he ran the 37 last year 2021 for JTG. Finished 7th in stage 2.
The rain.
Finished 15th at the end of the race. Yeah, obviously, complete shit show of a race. But he does have a cup start here. He's one of those guys. He's gotten off to such a bad start this year that people are already, forgetting about Ryan Preece. And, DFS-wise, I'm not saying betting-wise, I don't think he's going to win the race this year. But DFS-wise, that's the kind of guy that you need to try to capitalize on while people are forgetting about him because he's in a good car.
Preece was in that winning lineup. Yeah, he was in the winning lineup for Phoenix, where he finished 12th.
Yep.
The problem with Preece is he was A.J. Allmendinger's teammate for, I think, one of those years. What year was A.J. Allmendinger in that JTG car? It may not matter. No, Allmendinger stopped in 2018. But Preece was Chris Buescher's teammate for a couple of those years, and then Stenhouse's, I believe. And he just wasn't as good as those guys at road courses even. And Stenhouse is terrible. Preece is not good at road courses. Look at what... And I understand that A.J. Allmendinger and Preece weren't teammates ever, but look at what A.J. Allmendinger did with a JTG car at road courses. And then 1 year later, what Preece did in a JTG car at road courses, and 2 years and 3 years later. He didn't have good road course finishes. He did get a 9th at the Daytona road course. He completed the 69 challenge the first 2 races of the year in 2021.
Nice.
Finished 6th at Daytona and then 9th at Daytona road course. But that was his only top 10 at a road course, and the rest were pretty abysmal results. I'm not talking not good. I'm talking abysmal. So let's look at Glenny DNF'd his first year. Sonome finished 29th. Then in 2020, which was the COVID year, we didn't have Glenn or Sonoma. We had Daytona road course. We finished 23rd. He did finish 14th at the Roval. So I think there's potential at the Roval. But then 2021, when we had a bunch of road courses, we had the Daytona road course. He finished 9th, as we mentioned. Then the next one was Circuit of the Americas in the rain. He finished 15th. Then Sonoma finished 21st. Not very good. We had Road America. He finished dead last. I think there was obviously an issue there. Glenny finished 28th. And then Indy Road Course with all the turtle issues, he finished 35th. And then Roval, he finished 19th. So I don't think it's impossible for him to finish inside the top 10. I mean, if you're finishing 19th and 9th at the Rovals, or 14th at the Rovals for JTG, that's pretty good. I think he can do it at the Rovals for Stewart-Haas. And he certainly could do it at the non-Rovals. I'm not like super high on him, if you will. Like he's definitely going to step up in equipment, but even looking at the lower series, just not a great road course racer in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else you want to talk about when it comes to COTA?
I'm just curious how these, how the Jensen Buttons, how the Kimi Räikkönens, how the Jimmy Johnsons and Jordan Taylors of the world are going to be and how they're going to fare in terms of DFS ownership. I think maybe a lot of those guys will be based off practice. So I think it could be interesting to fade the guys that look fast in practice potentially. I'm not really too sure. That definitely throws things for a little bit of a loop there, puts a wrench in things.
Yeah, like those guys, to me, I'm not going to change my perspective on these road course ringers. Like, Kimi Räikkönen, he raced at Watkins Glen last year. Everybody was super high on him. He started 27th. I don't remember his ownership in DFS, but I know it was sky high. I had none of him because I just don't feel like these road course ringers have the advantage that they did 20 years ago. Even with this car that's more equal, I feel like the talent level of these regular Cup Series drivers has gotten so much higher on these road courses that these guys like Kimi Räikkönen and the Button guy, I just don't see them making a huge impact like Boris Said used to do back in the day, or Ron Fellows. Like, it's just not there. Like, yes, they're very good at these types of racetracks, but they're not going to go out there and win a race, in my opinion. So
Kimi was fine. Like, he was running up there at the Glen, maybe around 15th, and he was honestly on a pretty good strategy. I think he was coming forward. He was in around 14th, 15th, and he got caught up in somebody else's mess at the bus stop there. I remember that. And there was that, it was the partial rain race and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was going from wet to dry. And I think everybody's excited because it was going from wet to dry. And so they're, Kimi Räikkönen drove in Formula One where they drive in the wet. So I think that's part of why his ownership was so high. I think, similar for Joey Hand, which,
yeah,
Joey bummed that Joey Hand isn't in a car this year, but
he actually did look pretty decent. And he raced for Rick Ware Racing last year, and he actually did look decent. I'll give him that.
Yeah, in a Ware car, like a true Ware car. It wasn't a Stewart-Haas supported Ware car. So I know Priest had a couple races last year that were in Ware cars that were Stewart-Haas supported, and Priest looked good in those. But that was a true Ware car that Hand was driving, and he did really well. But so a little bummed not to see him in this, but Jensen Button's going to be in that car with the Stewart-Haas support. So I'm curious how these guys will do and what their ownership will be like. Definitely makes it tough to kind of figure out from a DFS standpoint.
Yeah. Moving on to our picks for the race in Random Fantasy Racing. I know you've already made your Random Fantasy Racing driver. You had Ryan Blaney last week, who had a speeding penalty, went 2 laps down, came back and finished 7th. Somehow got dock blocked, but got through the dock block and had a good finish. He was also your pick to win on the podcast. I had Alex Bowman as my pick to win. He finished 14th. But the defending winner of this race is dock blocked now, because you have Ross Chastain for Circuit of the Americas.
Yep. I have dock blocked the defending race winner, so that one's tough. And like I think I said last week that me picking Blaney to win was the first time I ever picked the dock blocked driver. I can already say I'm not going to be doing that this week. But yeah, sitting here 4th in the Influencer Cup standings, 127 points. 5th place is at 100. So we're 27 points to the good. Shout outs to 27, my favorite number. But we're way behind 3rd place. So we're kind of just sitting here comfortably in 4th place in the Influencer Cup standings.
That's solid. Hey, I'm 22nd. Shout out Logano. I have 39 points.
Nice.
Maybe I can get up there and do some more.
Looks like I finally got credited for having 5 starts despite only having four starts. Oh, no, I only have 4 starts.
No,
Never mind.
yeah.
Nope. I was looking at RotoDog, not RotoDoc. Dang. Yeah, I only have 4 starts, even though I actually have 5 starts, which is weird, but it is what it is. So, yeah, I'm sitting down there in 1,087th place out of 2,403 entrants. And a lot of these don't even have, 4 starts. A lot of them at the bottom are 1 or 2 or 3 starts. I actually have 5 starts. Like, I legitimately have 5 starts. But I'm kind of hovering mid-pack here. Looks like you are even further behind me. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I missed the whole race.
And that's with the top. I have a top 5 this year, and I'm still that far back. I had a 5th place at Fontana with Harvick. But since then, I've gotten Gillen, McLeod, Gregson, and this week I have Johnson.
That's amazing. My best finish was 7th. But I haven't had like a horrendous finish. I just haven't had any good ones. My finishes have ranged from 7th to 25th. So I've had nothing worse than a top 25. They just have been a 25th, a 20th, a 16th, and a 7th. So like nothing to write home about. Now, RotoDog, my dog LB, is in 266th place in the standings.
Oh, wow.
Pretty good out of, 2,000, almost 600. Like he's almost in the top 10% of everybody. So good boy. Well done. Good boy, LB.
I'm quickly browsing the standings here. I'm not seeing anybody. Last year we saw, I think like in the first 5 races, we saw someone with like 3 wins. I don't see anybody right now above 2 wins. So the leader right now has only 1 win, but top 10 in all 5 races so far this year. They have Corey LaJoie this week. So I have a feeling that's going to come to an end. There's also the third and fourth place teams that have top 5s in both races. The 3rd place team has Justin Haley this week, so that could be extended, that top 10 streak. The 4th place team has Reddick, so good road course racer. It's going to depend on how those Toyotas show up, but both those guys or girls could continue their top 10 streak. But it's always funny paying attention to this stuff. Something that's completely random and
Yeah, it's fun.
Like the top guy right now, or the top person right now in the Random Fantasy Racing has an average finish of 4.4. The results are 4th, 3rd, 1st, 6th, and 8th. Like their worst result is Eric Jones last week in Atlanta, who finished 8th. It's just crazy.
That's insane. Yeah. I will say RotoDog, he has a 1-point race. He finished 36th with Joey Logano. Now, if Logano had a result we could have expected from Logano at Vegas, oh my God, RotoDog could be up there. But unfortunately for him, he got Joey Logano that race, and Joey Logano finished dead last. Like, let's add 40 points to RotoDog's score. Where would he be if he had 174 points instead of 134 points? He'd be sitting in the top 25 of everybody if he hadn't gotten Joey Logano.
And unfortunately,
maybe Logano had finished, I should say.
Maybe not even unfortunately, but he's got Todd Gilliland this week. So Gilliland showed like
had a top 5
some
last
promise.
Year.
Yeah, some promise at road courses before, but yeah, definitely not a surefire pick by any means. But speaking of picks, who is your pick to win this week? Because I'm going to go first, and I'm going to be an asshole and take Kyle Larson.
Nice. By the way, shout out to Jason Fellenbaum, who follows me on Twitter. I follow them. He was one of the ones who won the big parlay last year. He didn't win $1 million, but on the same race, I think he won like a $70,000 parlay or something. Similar idea. He's 28th in the random fantasy standings. So, good shout outs there. So you take Kyle Larson. I am going to go ahead and take Alex Bowman.
I like it. That was going to be my second choice. So
let's do it.
I didn't want to pick Bowman 2 weeks in a row. So you got Bowman this week. I got Larson. I like that. Yeah. I really like Bowman this week.
I would pick Larson. I just don't want to pick the same one as you. So since you're an asshole, I'll take Bowman. But I mean, I would have picked Larson otherwise for sure.
Yeah, it's so easy when like last year we had Larson and Elliott in every single race, so it was easy. Like, I took Elliott, you took Larson. I took Larson, you took Elliott.
I wouldn't be, except that one race I took Tyler Reddick and he won.
Yeah, yep.
Road America. But I wouldn't be surprised if actually A.J. Allmendinger won this race. And from a betting perspective, I don't think I can bet him at 13. But I have him at like a similar range of outcomes as Suarez and Alex Bowman, who, you can get at longer prices than that. So from a betting perspective, I might end up betting Bowman and or Suarez at circa. I think they're still at 22. I'll have to check and see if they moved since we've been recording this podcast. But yeah, just a fun little race we got here, but definitely a race to, if you're going to bet, I'd probably stray towards betting longer odds because we don't know a lot, except I'll probably break my own rule and hit Chevy minus 125 or minus 130, whatever I can find to win the race.
I'm definitely going to bet Larson, and that's going to be my early week bet because I know he's going to go down to plus 400, plus 300 by the end of the weekend. So I'm going to get in on that while I can and just probably roll with that.
Yeah, and you've got Jimmy Johnson for your random fantasy pick. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
I am. I'm excited to see how he does along with those other guys that are the quote unquote ringers this week.
Yep.
So we have a solid field of cars here. So it's going to be fun to see how this plays out. Plus the no that doesn't count as a beer crack.
No. Okay. So if you're watching on YouTube, you saw I started with this thing. This is like a flavored water. It's no sugar. It's just water with like berry flavoring. Then I had the Luvabella Cabernet, a little tiny glass of that. I've been polishing off the coffee I had from this morning, and now I opened a regular water. So four different drinks on this show for me. That's awesome. We're not recording at night. We're recording in the middle of the day for me, Pacific time. So
still middle of the day for me as well. So, but hey, we did cross with my 3. I've been drinking hard monsters this episode. I really like these, by the way. But with my 3 that I drank during this episode, that puts us over 50 beers opened on Stacking Dennys this year through the first 6 episodes. So, or
nice.
7 episodes. So, yeah, that's all I got for this week. You got anything else?
No, that's all I got. I'm excited about this episode because I want people to tell me how wrong my opinions are. I love it. I love the discussion.
Yeah.
I've got some pretty strong convictions on this one, and some strong convictions as to why I'm pretty much just not betting a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's always funny. We get most of our comments for Stacking Dennys on YouTube, and it's always funny because we did that live stream last week after the Hendrick penalty dropped, and we got like comments that we were like Hendrick fanboys and all this other shit, and it's like, no, we're just calling it like it is. Like I don't consider myself I've always been a Kyle Busch fan, but as far as like one of the comments was they simped so hard for Hendrick. What are you talking about? Come on, you can't admit that penalty wasn't bullshit. Like, come on, like.
Yep, I simped for Hendrick because none of them are my favorite drivers except Alex Bowman. I like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like I don't. Not a William Byron fan. I'm not a Kyle Larson fan. I'm not a Chase Elliott fan. Heck no. So I think people just make up stuff for whatever reason.
Yeah. Anyway, we do appreciate the comments, though. Keep them coming. Always keep coming with those suggestions on what we should talk about, and we'll be sure to hit those on these episodes. But outside of that, good luck this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. What race do we have next? I think it's Richmond, if I remember right. So we're back to a short flat track race, if that is the 7th race of the season. Yep, Richmond Raceway. So that'll be nice to talk about Richmond and the short flats. We definitely saw that's going to be another strategy race, just like this weekend at COTA. Richmond turned into a strategy race last year with the tire wear, tire fall off, and whether you pit twice or just once. And
now we have even more tire fall off with the lower downforce package. So
yeah, So that'll definitely be interesting. And then we're going to talk about the Bristol dirt race after that week. So, that's going to wrap it up for Stacking Dennys this week. Thank you for listening. Good luck to you with your betting, with your fantasy. We'll talk to you next week when we go to Richmond. See you guys.